Hi, I'm David Hanson from Living Rent Glasgow. I'm a member of Living Rent, and I'm the communications lead for the Glasgow branch. I'll tell you a little bit about how we can solve the housing crisis. So, 51% of the UK's net worth comes from land, 10.2 trillion pounds. Property speculation is a key source of wealth, and the value of private housing is tied to the value of private land. Where we have private land and private housing, we have profit seeking on what many people would consider to be a human right. But social violence inevitably occurs when an activity that is essential to our humanity is subject to exploitation and control by others, the home. The home is the site of security. It's something we all need. Yet housing is viewed not as home, but as real estate, subject to the whims of the market and the profit motive. This is manifesting itself. Take Glasgow, for example. In the stock transfer of 2003, all of Glasgow's 80,000 council homes were transferred to housing associations, private, not-for-profit companies such as Glasgow Housing Association, in the UK's largest ever property transfer, leading to the privatization and some would call the evisceration of social housing. More recently, Glasgow Housing Association, through its Transforming Communities Glasgow program, demolished 11,000 homes and replaced them with 6,500 private and mid-market rent homes, but replaced them with only 600 social rented homes. Glasgow lost over 10,000 social rented homes. It was privatization on a mass scale. But this privatization of social housing, along with gentrification, is supported by the states, by the council itself. The Transforming Communities program comes from an urbanization program that explicitly sets out to increase land value. They're not about transforming communities for its residents. They're about transforming them for profit. The Whiskey Bond itself, our current venue, is part of the state-encouraged Transforming Communities program. It's not an isolated transformation. We're in the dark blue area, one of the better off areas of Glasgow, but we're surrounded by the dark red, so the most deprived areas in Scotland. There's a strong correlation between inequality and creativity. The more creative a region is, the more inequality you find. If the state is driving gentrification, helping increase land value, and ultimately encouraging private landlords, then we have homes for profit. Because of rising rent, stagnant wages, and a lack of social housing, those stuck in homes for profit in the private rented sector suffer. And therefore, what that suffering looks like is 15% of the housing stock in Scotland is now privately rented. 41% of young people are now living in it. Rent's gone up 30% since 2010. Poverty is up 75%. This is what the private rented sector is doing to us. This is the human cost of living in the private rented sector. But Glasgow has a rich history of housing struggle. In 1915, the Glasgow rent strikes ushered in the first ever UK rent controls and ultimately the establishment of social housing, along with the likes of Mary Barber, Helen Crawford, and other women of the working class. But there are also countless other housing struggles within Glasgow. That is the legacy that we have, and this is the legacy that Living Rent is building upon. Living Rent is continuing that legacy, the legacy of fighting for the home to be a safe place. We're Scotland's Tenants Union. We're a democratic organization run by and for tenants. We want homes for people, not for profit, and to ensure that everyone has access to decent and affordable housing. Living Rent was initially established as a campaign, but quickly came to realizing that just campaigning wasn't enough. We needed actual tenant power to back up our demands and create lasting change for the housing system that we actually want to see. This is why we became a union, in order to collectively fight and see what we can imagine for housing in Scotland. Living Rent addresses the power imbalance between tenants and landlords. Like I said earlier, social violence inevitably occurs when an activity that is essential to our humanity, our home, is subject to exploitation and control by others. Those in control of our homes have more power individually than we do individually as tenants. So how do we begin to, deal with that balance? Well, first, we make landlords obey the law. In Scotland, you can only charge rent and deposit, yet landlords and letting agents continually charge illegal fees like credit checks or reference fees on top of already skyrocketing rents. We've estimated that £1.5 million have been charged per year in Scotland on these illegal fees. But we also fight back by making landlords and letting agents carry out repairs to make sure that homes are habitable and fit to live as the law requires. Tenants live in squalor in Glasgow. Slugs, damp, mold, you name it, we've seen it. And it's not surprising because Shelter Scotland has said that 1 in 3 homes in Scotland do not meet their living home standard. But we're winning. We've reclaimed thousands of pounds for tenants, forced landlords to carry out repairs, and we do this because we use a variety of tactics, primarily direct action. Take this picture, for example. Castle Residential was one of the worst offenders for charging illegal fees, yet through collective power and our insistence, we made them capitulate and pay back fees to those tenants. We're also campaigning for rent controls that Scotland needs. We've run surveys that show 75% of Scots support rent controls, and over 17,000 people have signed our petition for proper rent controls. We've got considerable media coverage, and the Scottish Housing Minister, Kevin Stewart, knows that we're coming for him. But ultimately, our power comes from the community. The neighborhood is the new factory. In a post-industrial society and with the decline of traditional working-class power, it's about organizing individual communities and meeting their needs while building that collective power to counter the systematic exploitation of the home. We're knocking on doors in our neighborhoods every day, starting new branches all around Glasgow. Up in Maryhill, we have the Wynford Tenants Union, who are taking on extortionate heating costs. And down in Govan, tenants are organizing to combat creeping gentrification and stand up to housing associations who don't put tenants' interests first. Some are likely suggest that the housing crisis can be solved by merely building more homes. But there's 35,000 homeless applications a year in Scotland. There's also 35,000 empty private homes. The housing crisis isn't about a lack of homes. It's when the site of security, your home, becomes a good, a commodity to be bought and sold with little consideration for the human cost. It's only through strong collective tenant power that we can solve the housing crisis. And from only £3 a month, you can join Living Rent, Scotland's most effective and exciting tenants union in decades, and make sure that we have homes for profit, homes for people, not for profit.